This position was really started long before I arrived in the 80s. Our board of governors, or board of directors at the time, was really interested in opposing a rate increase by Arizona Public Service, which is our largest electric utility. And so as a result of that, they became interveners on a regular basis, and it has just evolved since that time. When I started in 2003, the rate case came up again with APS, and somebody called me and said, you need to intervene in this. And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I had never been to the Corporation Commission. I had never been before a body such as that. And so we've been doing that ever since. We just sort of winged it. And I will tell you that the other lawyers in the case and the commissioners and the judges in the case have always been really kind to us, kind to me. And I think they acknowledge that because I'm not a lawyer and I really don't know what I'm doing, they've been very helpful, at least at the beginning. They were very helpful. We have five major regulated utilities in the state. They each have their own designated territories, so it's not like many other states where you have just a jillion utilities with which you're interacting. In this past year, the five that you see on the screen right now, each of them were in for a rate increase. So we were pretty busy, and I have to give a shout out to Kevin Henchhold in our office, who does a lot of the research and preparation of our testimony for all of his work on it. But we just resolved the final case, and I'll talk a little bit about sort of a win that we didn't expect that came out of that this year. We have one major unregulated utility, that's Salt River Project, which is the second largest electric utility in the state, and then we've got a bunch of electric co-ops, mostly in the rural communities, and many regional and local water companies that we're just beginning to kind of get involved with. And I guess, the bottom line, this last bullet on this slide is, if we weren't there, I have no doubt that low-income customers would not be treated very well at these utility companies. They would be just ignored, honestly. There's just nobody who speaks up. We've developed good alliances with AERP in the state, with the Sierra Club, with SWEEP, which is an energy efficiency group, but they are not there to represent low-income customers. And so I think it's one of the most important things that we can be engaged with. Talk a little bit about relationship building. I have spent a ton of time. When I started at ACA, I should say, we had one program that we were administering on behalf of the utilities, and it was an APS bill assistance program. It also had a little bit of weatherization money attached to it. And as a result of that, we started developing connections with the folks over at the utility company, and that expanded into reaching out and connecting with all of the other utilities. And we just started with a conversation about the programs that they were running, what we were concerned about, and honestly educating them about poverty. A lot of it was just talking about what are the needs of your customers, and what are you providing and what aren't you providing. And so that's really where it started. I can now call and get the vice president, the president, and the executive team on the phone, which I never take for granted, because they can always change. That can change on a dime. I totally appreciate that, but I at least have an ear with the folks over there. And we now actually have 3 of the utilities represented on our board of directors for the state association. So that helps too in a variety of ways. Not the least of which is they understand what the issues are that their customers are facing. We've also spent a lot of time getting to know the other parties in the case. So when we show up before the Corporation Commission, they know who we are, we know who they are. We have the Residential Utility Consumer Office, RUCO, which is supposed to stand up for all of the residential consumers, depending on who's in office and who's appointed as the director. That support can be stronger or less strong. But we still maintain a relationship with all of them. I met one of them recently, a new staff member over there, who I hadn't met, and I introduced myself, and he said, "Oh, you're the low-income lady." I'll take that. So, and I should say, we also spend a lot of time with commissioners and with their staff at the commission, which is really probably one of our most important relationships at the commission level is the staff that are engaged over there, because I don't know about the other public utility commissions in your states, but they're pretty influential and can really make or break some of the requests that we have going in. So we work to learn as much as we can about the case and the impact on the customers. We maintain our focus on low-income customers. As I said, we really don't branch out at all. And often when we file testimony, or even when we make a settlement, engage in a settlement, it's really in a very niche way. We sign it, but we are very clear that it's because of the low-income components. In the early 70s and 80s, the ACA board was really the group that wanted to get involved and started going down to the commission and intervening in these cases. Our engagement has continued. As I said, we just finished a bunch of interventions. We've managed a bill assistance program and small weatherization program, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that's evolved into. In 2008, and this was probably really a pivotal point for us, in 2008, because of a settlement that came into the state because of an El Paso gas pipeline issue, we started what we called at the time the first warm weather fuel fund, which we now call the Home Energy Assistance Fund. And the intention there was that $3 million was set aside in this settlement for low-income customers, and the state was intending to just throw it into the LIHEAP pot. And we knew that if that was done, the money would be gone in about 6 months. So we really advocated strongly to create a fuel fund and use that money as seed money and as an investment to help us collect and leverage other utility funds in the state. So we did that. We had community forums all over the state and have really grown that opportunity. As I said, we have relationships with various utility partners. And one of the things I want to say is we really try to be reasonable in our advocacy. So we're gonna fight as hard as we can for the low-income customers, but we want to be reasonable from the perspective that we know that there are issues, legitimate issues utilities face. We want to be respectful of that, but we also don't want to sort of get rolled over in their advocacy for themselves, which is pretty strong. And the other thing that we do is we leverage the partnerships and the providers that we have around the state in these programs. So with the Home Energy Assistance Fund, we have 32 providers in the state. When we started, we committed to just contracting money out to the CAP agencies. And within a couple of years, we found they couldn't keep up with the flow of funds, which is not a great position to be in when you've got all this money and no one can spend it. So we have 11 designated CAPs. We've added, as you can see, 21 partners to the mix today. I talked a little bit about those relationships already. We also advocate, obviously, for funding at the federal level with LIHEAP and the DOE money for weatherization. And then we also work with the customers quite a bit. So one of the things that we leverage is the stories that the customers can tell. And I want to mention how important this is for a couple of reasons. One is, again, the customers are usually not seen, and I can go in and make the best case that I can, but I can't tell the customer story. Several years ago, SRP had a rate proposal that they were hearing, and we invited some members of the community that came in, and they were a number of women who told the story of their families, and they told the story of what it would meant if this rate increase was to go into effect. And I think it was about a $5 to $7 a month increase for them. Many of them were ill. All of them were low income, and they persuaded the board to completely change the proposal. So please don't ever underestimate the power of those stories. What we've accomplished, so we've increased funding for bill assistance and weatherization programs across the board. Every single regulated company today has a bill assistance program, a weatherization program, and a customer-driven contribution program. So we receive now most of those funds. We leverage them, we invest the money, and we earn interest on the money, which goes right back out into the community. We did get one of the utilities to add a weatherization program that wasn't providing it at the time, which we thought was a great success. All utilities now support, as I said, all these programs. All the utilities offer a discount rate, which wasn't the case many years ago. 2 utilities are now automatically enrolling low-income customers in their discounts when that customer receives bill assistance. from an agency that provides it. They're no longer sending their customers to payday lenders to pay their bills, which was a big deal several years ago. Many of them were just advertising that that's a great spot where you can go and pay your bill, which we fought hard against. And in the most recent APS case, they've introduced a community solar program that is intended to really benefit low-income families more than any other group in their service territory. And I say that because it's a great thing to do, but it's really not that great a program. We're hoping it's a start, but we had to sort of negotiate through a lot of details with the solar companies in the state who have a very contentious relationship with our utilities right now, because net metering is going away, and all the solar companies are pretty distressed. So they signed on to this agreement as well. So one of the things that just through the relationship story that I wanted to mention is in the APS case, when the case was dropped, it had zero money in it for bill assistance. And we called up the company and said, this is incredible, this is impossible, why would you even think of that? Oh, we forgot, we thought you had money. Well, they had provided money to us, they had provided money to us 5 years ago, and they gave us all the money at once, which was great. But, we report to them monthly. So to say that they didn't know that the money was gone was sort of bogus. Anyway, they said, we'll take care of it in the settlement discussions. So we went into the settlement discussions with our testimony and asked for $1.5 million in bill assistance money. Now, up to this point, prior to this being in a case, we had a set fund of $250,000 for bill assistance and about $1 million for weatherization. At the end of the case, we had $1.25 million in bill assistance per year going forward. So we'll see how that plays out. And at the end of the case, when it was being heard before the commissioners, one commissioner offered an amendment to increase the weatherization program by $1 million, which was completely unexpected, which set the energy efficiency people on edge because he was taking it from one pot and putting it into our pot. So we're going to have to navigate that a little bit and see how that happens. At the end of the case, when I was leaving, one of the staff members for the commission came up to me and said, hey, we want to talk to you about an idea we have, which is to not require the weatherization program to be an energy efficiency program anymore. We just want to fund it as a program. Okay, call me. Well, I'm going to be out of town, but I'll be right back and we'll have that conversation. So that's going forward, and that's a result of just sort of being persistent and kind of obnoxious at times, but consistently persistent, I guess is the best way to put it. So who's best positioned to do this? I mean, I heard Keith say earlier, it's nice to have somebody who's dedicated to this. So Kevin is sort of dedicated to this, has been, and he is paid through the administrative costs that we receive through the management of these funds. I should tell you we have $5 million invested, and where most of that money comes from, and I neglected to mention it, is we went to the legislature about 6 years ago and asked them to take the unclaimed utility deposits, these sheet funds that all utilities, at least in Arizona, are required to maintain for 2 years. It's deposits that people leave on the table when they move or whatever, which had been going to our Department of Revenue, then to our Department of Economic Security, our welfare agency, and then to the agencies. And along the line, more and more money was getting siphoned off those funds. And by the time the agencies were seeing it, it was about a 50% cut. So we went to the legislature and asked them to put that money to direct it to a statewide fuel fund agency. We're the only one in the state that does that, so we receive those funds on an annual basis, and it runs anywhere from $1.4 to $3.4 million a year. The great thing about it is that that money can be a little bit more flexible, and we just started a pilot project that allows, when it's 120 degrees in the summer and people's AC goes out, it allows people to go out and replace the AC without running through the weatherization program. It's pretty popular. So anyway, so I do this, I don't do it full time obviously, but it takes up a lot of my time, which I'm grateful to do. We get our board involved, and we get our boards of supervisors involved, and many of our caps are public, so we get boards through them. We also get city councils involved when we can. We get our members involved. We're always asking people to come in and participate. And most important, as I mentioned earlier, we get the customers involved directly. And that, as I said, has the greatest impact by far. Honestly, I think it's just showing up at every rate case, filing testimony and showing up in every rate case, and then having meetings with them to explain who we are and what we do. They turn over in Arizona every 4 years. Not all, they can serve 2 terms, but we go in and we meet with them and we meet with the staff, and that makes a big difference. And frankly, the utilities give us some credibility. So the relationship that we've developed with them has been pretty consistent, and I think we maintain integrity with them. So they're actually an ally in that respect. So it's taken time. It's it hasn't always been that way, but it's just being consistent.
So I just have my questions are 2-part. So you're the executive director of the association. So if you can speak to how much time you as the executive director spend on this kind of work. And then also that you talked about how this was sort of a board-led decision. So if there are associations in the room who want to start this conversation with their board, what's the best way to sell that? And then we'll move on.
So this year was an aberrant year because, as I said, every single utility was in for a rate increase. I probably spent 60% of my time on utility stuff this year, which is too much. But it was, we had to. How you get your board's attention, if you find somebody who does do math in your state, it's a really easy argument, I think, to begin, which is, look how much money, so if Roger Colton has done some great work about energy burdens and how much low-income customers pay compared to a regular person, regular middle-income, upper-income family. And that data has helped us a lot, just to begin that conversation. I think if it were me and we weren't currently involved, I would begin there and just say, look what the low-income customers are paying up to these utility companies. Look what their profits are, and sort of look at that too. And I just begin to make the case that this is inexcusable. And for us, it happened very quickly, and as I said, it was a very organic, from the board up kind of a decision. But that's where I would start, is really showing the data. How many low-income customers are there? It's usually, we just use that it's a percentage of, it's a straight percentage of what the poverty level is. And then we pretty much go up to 200% of poverty when we're using numbers, because that's what the eligibility has become for all of our utility programs. And we have a 20% weatherization program with no green charge, just FYI, Dave.
Thank you.
Frequently, handling our relationships with the utilities, handling our relationship with the state of Oregon, and who delivers our energy assistance and weatherization grants. The history of my positions it's changed a lot. I wanted to get into the history of how it started, because where it started and where it is now is very different, and the roles that I assume are very different than my predecessors. It's kind of modified as we've grown as an association. But in 1999, a bill was passed in Oregon by a coalition, which included our current association. Also, our energy coordinators that deliver our program services had a nonprofit for 30 years. That was their own association. They helped fund this position, and they were actively engaged in passing this bill. And what the bill did is created a public purpose charge that included low-income weatherization and low-income energy assistance. So it created 2 large sums of money that the community action agencies get. So it's $8.8 million for weatherization, just for 2 investor-owned utility territories, and included, well, it's now up to $20 million per year in energy assistance. So the funding for my position came from the state of Oregon, the association directors, and the coordinators association split that cost in the beginning. The position at the time was solely created to advocate to other stakeholder groups on why this bill should be passed. And the bill was passed, and now we have fully funded programs in the investor-owned territory. here's some of the work plan objectives. There was really about relationship building with stakeholders involved in that process in 1999, and be an advocate at the commission to improve the natural gas tariffs. If you were here in the last workshop, sorry, we went into the details of the improvements that have been able to be made in those by having a full-time advocate at the Utilities Commission. Cynthia is right. I think being persistently obnoxious, I would say, my kids would say I do that, but you can really make headway with stakeholder groups by just being a visible face at all times. It surprises me that there's so little associations that have a full-time energy person, because you have to be a constant face. And you're essentially reliant on a utility when they file their rate case to be generous and on their own will decide that they want to increase low-income weatherization or energy assistance. So not being there, not being recognized by commission and commission staff, I wonder how some of these programs are so well funded, because just being at the commission at all times and having a face there, they can place, they know where they can go to for a low-income advocate. They call me, the relationships with staff at the commission. At any time now, like I've built those relationships so well, I don't even have to pick up the phone. They call me now. I don't even have to annoy them. There's this issue coming up. We're gonna ask you before you make a scene at the commission, which I do. Go get, a bunch of people off the street, other stakeholders, and you bring them to a commission meeting to testify, and you embarrass the commissioners. They hate that. So they call me first now. So I wanted to go over the current funding structure for my position, because it's not normal. I have a weird gray area. I have a contract for energy services with the state of Oregon, but I'm hired by the Community Action Partnership, the state association. So I have to negotiate the contract every year and the deliverables within that contract with the state of Oregon. That times can be contentious, because representing community action agencies' need, it sometimes puts it in an adversarial role with the state of Oregon and leaving me in the middle. But I also work as an intermediary between the state and the agencies at times. So it gives me a good perspective of being able to try to balance those interests. But I am hired, and my boss is our executive director, and so my priority is representing the community action agency's needs. So there's 4 grants that I'm paid for right now, and they're primarily state weatherization and energy assistance, the administrative money from that, and then also a portion of the LIHEAP Assurance 16 money. So it's a mixed match of administrative money from state delivered weatherization and energy assistance grants, which also allows me to be at the commission. There's not a conflict with the utility board. So most states have a citizens utility board of some type that's a ratepayer funded advocacy group. Because my funds aren't part of that, I can take at times a harder position on low-income issues at the commission. I consider myself an environmentalist, but in Oregon, that term is very different, and you don't think about the low-income interest. You would think that you would live in this state that would understand the low-income interest at the commission with people that hold themselves out to be, but they really don't. They don't think about low-income issues. You'd be so surprised at the issues I have to deal with, not from utility companies, not from our ratepayer advocates, but from environmentalists. And being that anchor for low income is one of the only things balancing out Oregon's energy policy right now. We would have rate impacts that you would not believe, some of the ideas that are coming out and that they're trying to fund through rates. So I'm just going through a little bit of like specifics with my work plan with the state. This is language that is put in there that I've negotiated with the state of Oregon. Obviously, I can't lobby. I can't lobby for a bill, but I can go to the legislatures and inform them of the legislation, or if they need a question answered. We do have a contract lobbyist, but I kind of take that handoff from our agencies and our agencies' policy needs, and help inform legislators. So I increase awareness of low-income energy assistance or energy issues in public forums. I mean, that's really my role, is to represent the low-income programs, not just the community action agencies, not just the state of Oregon, but the low-income issues in these main public bodies. I assist Oregon Housing in targeted data collection. That's pretty much just providing reports to relevant stakeholders when asked. Legislator asks, how many homes did you weatherize last year? Usually I'm the person that delivers that information as a point of contact for both our lobbyists and other lobbyists from the utilities. So I think it creates a streamlined system, because some associations don't have that energy person with those numbers right away, but during session, I'm usually on call to provide that information. Obviously expanding the programs, working in partnership. We've increased every natural gas tariff since I've been there. I've been here 4.5 years. We've almost doubled the investment in money at the commission on our natural gas programs. We increased energy assistance by $5 million this year. Those are the type of initiatives I'm constantly working on. And just being, you can read the language, but just being the face of low-income energy, people see us as a leader in that realm now. They have somebody to ask. It's just, who do you go to? If you don't have an energy person working at your association, who do the people in your state go to ask a question about low-income energy issues when there's going to be a rate impact? You should have a person there to respond to these requests. I also assist the CAP. So, when there's a grant that comes up, we've tried Healthy Homes grants. We didn't get them, but I'm there to support our agencies and help writing those grants. Some program delivery. We created an oil conversion program this year. Part of that was delivered from the state association on my side. So supporting our agencies in grant writing, service delivery, there is some of that, which I enjoy. It mixes the job up, and it gives me a better relationship actually with our agencies, being able to help deliver programs for them. Here's some of the new. I'm a part of so many work groups. I mean, that's probably 25% of my job is just, I'm on policy work groups with legislators, I'm on policy work groups with the utilities. Again, that gives you another place to have a voice though. It's not always in the contentious adversarial relationship at the commission, but just having these public policy work groups. Oregon's different. It's a really nice state. People get along. We actually talk things out before. Nobody surprises you with legislation. They don't surprise you with a filing at the commission. They come to you first, and we always try to have an agreement together before going into the session or into a rate case. A good example of that is our community solar bill was passed last year, and they let us have a lot of input, and we got 10% of that bill will go to low income. So 10% of the whole community solar program has to be dedicated to low income, and we worked with the utilities and the environmentalists on that. This is kind of just an overview of the deliverables. This is what the state wants. I have to report every month, though, to the state on my activities. I don't love the reporting. I think anybody here loves the reporting. But it does help you track what you've done and the goals you set. And here's a really important point. I'm an advocate for the state of Oregon, for their staff, that they can't do. Oregon Housing can't engage in these conversations the same way they deliver our low-income programs. They're happy to fund my position because I can defend them in public forums in a way that they can. There's been several attempts in Oregon of utilities to try to pass legislation that would move the programs from the state administered model that we have to a utility administered model. I tell them that I will die before I let them have those programs. Because working with utilities can be difficult at times in changing programs. And as frustrated as we get with the state of Oregon and our state program managers, they're better than at most times in working with utilities. They just because their heart's in the right place and they understand low-income issues much deeper than the utilities who's trying to make money for shareholders. So we've had that happen a lot where utilities try to move these programs out of the state of Oregon. Well, they can't defend themselves in public forums. They can't take positions politically. I can. So I am gladly in an extension of the state of Oregon at times because of my relationship in the way that it's structured where I have these deliverables. And then probably lastly is just outreach to stakeholders groups. The Citizens Utility Board is a ratepayer advocacy group. I work with them nonstop. Northwest Energy Coalition, BPA, which is a federal agency that delivers power via the hydro dam system in the Northwest. And the Energy Trust of Oregon does the market rate programs for energy efficiency. Having full-time built-in relationships with these organizations prevents disasters from happening. We had a sweep of our low-income funds the first month of my job, actually. $5 million got taken from low-income weatherization. My predecessor, but these organizations helped fight that. They were the ones that helped write the letters, reached out to legislators to get that sweep vetoed by the governor of Oregon at the time. But not having those relationships, we wouldn't have the protections we do on these programs. Here's just a few of the highlights. Since I've been there, increased the gas rebates from $5,000 to $12,000. Permanent $5 million this last year, increase in energy assistance. We got $650,000 pledge from the utility for the oil conversion program. We can use electric funds for bulk fuel replacements. We have a moratorium on winter shutoffs. That's something I worked on as my own personal goal last winter, and we got that as being a participant at the commission in the commission process. We now have regular data and reporting on disconnections from utilities. How effective are our energy assistance programs? Well, it's kind of hard to know because utilities hide disconnection data behind a wall. We now are breaking down that wall, and they're going to be forced to publish disconnection data monthly. We prevented the sweep of the weatherization funding. Community action, we just like to throw people into their jobs, I've noticed, and we just kind of sink or swim. My first month, there was a sweep, and I'm having to sit in meetings, and I didn't even know what weatherization was. I come from law. Well, I'm a lawyer by trade, so that was a sink or swim moment. And then this last legislative session got the low-income community solar carve-out for the 2%. There's a lot more in there. I think the bigger wins are what you don't see. We don't see cuts. We don't see programs going down because I think of CAPO's advocacy in these areas.
Who we are, I am the one full-time staff person for the state, working for those 30 community action agencies. As I mentioned, my background is working within community action, doing program development, grant writing, and advocacy work. So I'm not a lawyer. Keith is a lawyer for the state of Oregon, gets involved. Well, our structure is that I have one or more lawyers that I contract with on a regular basis. in order to get involved in the general rate cases within the Utility Transportation Commission. So I don't need a lawyer, I don't hire one. Turns out, similar to what's happening in Arizona, every major utility in Washington State, the investor in utility is filing out for increased rates on an annual basis. So it's almost a perpetual court case I'm involved in. I was in court yesterday remotely for a case. We're stacked up into 2018 at this point. So being able to prioritize the dollars that we have and the issues we want to get involved in is really important. We can't just be engaged in every issue in every case necessarily. And I'll talk a little bit more about what our strategies are there. So I have one or sometimes more lawyers that, on contract that I have regularly, and the consistency there is very important. Having, for us, we hired a lawyer who was with a public counsel. So he represented all ratepayers in Washington State. He was engaged, mission driven in terms of the issues, cared about it, was willing to work with us in terms of the pricing. I mean, the lawyers that utilities are bringing in are $700, $800 an hour. We can't compete at that level. So what I did was look at who is either potentially entering into the legal field or retiring from, see who is interested in working with us at a discounted rate, basically, so that way we can have high quality representation and have it be affordable. We also have expert witnesses. I'm an expert witness. I write testimony. I'm put on the stand to represent issues that are impacting low-income populations. When we start talking about math people, when we're talking about economists or other folks who are really digging into the details, we will hire out expert witnesses. A lot of them are here on the East Coast. Sometimes we'll share resources with public counsel, for example. They're an ally in a lot of our cases. They're looking out for all ratepayers in the state. We're looking at just the specific low-income populations and their impact, but we will share witnesses in a case where we have alignment on an issue, and that for us, it may cost $60,000 for an expert witness. We're paying a tenth of that because that's all we can afford, and it really helps to leverage our efforts and promote our issues in that case. So that's been really beneficial of late, and a lot of that has to do with developing those relationships. I think that's a good thing. Theme here today is really showing up, being engaged in the issues, and not just at the meetings, but precursor to the meeting or follow-up, where I will call staff at Utilities and Transportation Commission, which is our regulatory authority in the state. I'll talk about what their concerns are, what they're seeing with the utility. I'll call public counsel with their staff or their attorneys, ask them what's going on, and then other interveners in the states, and just to get a picture of what's happening there, let them know what I'm seeing. So that way, as Keith mentioned, they're calling you at a certain point, because if you're representing low-income interests and they know that, and the utility or others are going to be putting forward some ideas that are going to be negatively impacting that population, you have the ability to make them look really bad, and to basically make claims that it's not in the public interest for them to do any of what they're doing. Basically, we can hold hostage large rate cases, multi-million-dollar cases, because we want $1 million, or we want this issue to be resolved. And we can be difficult and say, we're going to fight, we're going to cost everyone a lot of money by taking this to court, litigating it, unless you give us something of what we want. And sometimes it's a really nice conversation, other times it's not. And that's just how we operate. So in Washington, perhaps unlike Oregon, we do get surprise rate cases sometimes. We do get surprise changes where the utilities are looking to increase their revenue, and they can do that by reducing their operational costs for customer service, which a lot of our low-income customers require a lot of help with bill arrangements, disconnect, reconnect. We're heavy users of those services, and if those are being reduced, that is something that we would want to be at the table discussing, because it comes up a lot, but basically if you're not at the table, you're on the menu in terms of getting money taken away from you that has been established, or money that could be established with involvement. The Department of Commerce delivering the state and federal dollars, and then we have our investor-owned utility dollars, and there's not any one agency really keeping track of those. The utilities kind of run their own programs. We have 5 major utilities there. So the energy project, one of my roles is to keep track of all of those funds coming out of the investor-owned utilities for weatherization and energy assistance, because they're not flowing through the state like they do in Oregon. They're flowing basically from the utility, and they contract individually with each agency. And I basically act as a representative for all those agencies and an intermediary between the utility, the agencies, and basically try to align the requirements for state and federal delivery of the program with the requirements from the utilities. So that's fun. Because we also, on top of that, have a layer of Bonneville Power Administration, which about half of Washington State is public power. So we have public utilities, cooperatives, or municipal run utilities. And so we have kind of 3 different parallel funding streams that no one entity is really keeping track of per se, except for the energy project. And so we work with the agencies, we work with the utilities, we work with the state, we work with Bonneville to make sure that we're all generally aligned in what we're trying to do and how the money can be spent. It's rather maddening at times, but it does provide a diversity of funding that is helpful just in terms of delivering services to our income. Okay, so in terms of what the results are annually from our efforts, so as I mentioned, 1993 was our first year in operations. 1996-97 was the first time we actually intervened in a rate case. And we basically became recognized from that point on when we petitioned to intervene. So the process is, in Washington, you petition to intervene. Other parties can choose to contest your intervention. Otherwise, you are able to be at the table if you have legal counsel. And in Washington State, interveners, the most recent case I was in, Kroger, Walmart, Fred Meyer, the industrial gas users of the Northwest, large heavy hitters in terms of energy consumption, have lawyers, have nonprofit organizations representing their interests. They're at the table, they're hiring expert witnesses, they're tracking these issues. We're basically the only low-income specific intervener. There is the Northwest Energy Coalition, works in Montana, Idaho, Oregon, Washington. They do have in their charter low-income issues as part of a larger kind of tracking of issues. They often will intervene. And most recently, Sierra Club, they've been very active nationally, but they have incorporated into their mission statement social equity aspect to their works, because as Keith mentioned, we can kind of work at cross purposes sometimes with trying to reduce carbon emissions and then what that impact is going to be on the rates payer. It's great, we want to go full renewable, but what's that going to do to a large percentage of our population who is struggling just to meet their basic monthly bill, and we're looking at increasing that. So a lot of players at the table, and I think it's important for low-income populations, for the agencies. At the very least, for me, it's not a huge expense hiring somebody just to be at the table and working on issues. I think the expense for us comes in with our legal fees. That's when we start spending the bigger dollars. But for us, I also hire a consultant who I basically can duplicate me. We can be in 2 places at once, and I can pay him when I need to show up. And he's been working with the organization for many years, Michael Carpin. It has been helpful just to, he kind of knows where all the bodies are buried. He kind of knows a long history of what has gone on in the Northwest, and having somebody like that around is really helpful, because then you get the real information about why things are the way they are. So in terms of outcomes, in 2016, we, with the investor-owned utilities, generated $6 million for low-income weatherization and about $25 million for energy assistance. So that's in addition to LIHEAP weatherization assistance, and that's just from the 5 investor-owned utilities. We have the Bonneville Power Administration served utilities, the public utilities. Each of those, those are very tough nuts to crack. They're kind of small commissioner governed utilities. Some are very open to helping low-income populations. Others do not have any programs whatsoever. And so those take a little bit more time working year after year on, waiting for an opportunity for a new general manager to come in so we can have a conversation, because the conversation's petered out or wasn't interest with previous management. So we just kind of track what we're able to accomplish depending on the amount of time that we have. So we basically prioritize, okay, we can get a lot of money from the investor utilities through the rate case process. On the public power side, we just kind of prioritize where we think we can make some inroads and just keep going that year after year working on that. And it's 20 years now that we've been working on this, and there's progress being made. We didn't have our first energy assistance program until early 2000s. So it was like 2001 when we had our first investor-owned utility energy assistance program. The energy project started in '93. We had 7 or 8 years where that took showing up and just plugging away at that. And it's not just the money that we're going after, it's also the consumer protections aspect. So we're looking at advanced metering infrastructure, the potential for prepay, disconnect, reconnect fees. We're looking at all of these types of policies that are implemented by utilities in terms of how customers connect, what they're paying for. So we're taking a close look at that because our communities, the low-income populations, are going to get hit with a lot of that. They're the ones who are suffering under a lot of those expensive disconnect, reconnect. And so we can engage in those conversations. We can bring information that we collect from the CAP agencies about what's going on. So to the extent that we're able to provide good data, we can back it up with personal stories and testimony from those impacted. We can help shift the conversation in terms of, at the very least, making the programs more either accessible or affordable for populations, or creating entirely new programs to help fund this work. And that could be through, right now I'm working on rate discount programs, percentage of income payment plan, arrearage management plan, so we can get people basically connected with affordable energy. We don't have to deal with a lot of disconnect, reconnect. And so we have a receptive utilities and receptive UTC in terms of having conversations about how we can provide benefit, not just a lump sum cash grant like LIHEAP, but extend the assistance over the course of an entire year, balancing out what the payments are for a household so permanently affordable if possible, and then getting them connected with weatherization and such. Let's see, a few other issues that I've been working on. There was a large settlement. Microsoft left Puget Sound Energy as a primary customer, so they can purchase their own power on the market. And as a result of that, they basically wanted to go more green. We were able to establish a fund for renewables for low income. So we have a 20-year ongoing funding stream that we're looking to help build generation resources that will directly benefit low income populations. So basically by being at the table and saying we want 10% of whatever's happening here, and it's going to be just around $3 million over 20 years that we'll use as seed money to help invest in resources. And had we not been there, that would not have happened. We're also engaged in electric vehicle infrastructure conversations. And I spend a lot of time supporting CAP agency staff for low-income weatherization energy assistance, basically helping to create more efficient programs, looking at systems, how to utilize investor-owned utility money to help to benefit our operations through engaging with their computer systems and reporting, with helping to leverage their advertising and outreach budgets so we can get people in the door. Because the big expense for agencies is just operating the programs, getting people in, and the utility has an interest in getting their customers brought in and get their bills paid for, and we can leverage their expertise with their staff that they have, who the whole marketing team in some cases. And so just making sure that we can leverage those resources. I can support the agencies.
They set aside specific funding for advocacy that you do at the commission. The utilities that pay for it out of through rates, you can apply for it. A lot of citizens utility boards or advocacy groups that are dedicated for ratepayer advocacy access them, but also industrial customers usually access them. So we're working on getting that, Ken, but right now it's monopolized by Coven.
Are any of the three, Leanna from Iowa, any of the 3 states dealing with online financing?
Online financing.
So, for example, if the home gets weatherized and they save $60 a month, their utility bill goes down $20, and the other $40 goes to pay for the weatherization.
Yes, all the time.
So on bill financing, basically.
So, yeah, we have a major issue with this. You can't deny a low-income person a loan. I mean, that's illegal. And we have energy efficiency market rate companies that have targeted low-income people and sold them a loan product that they could have gotten for free.
Yeah, and on bill financing, I think it's similar to that. I think that's making inroads in Washington State. And it's one of the concerns that we have. Anytime there are ESCOs, energy service companies, that are trying to get contracts with utilities, and that was one of the reasons why Energy Project was formed in the first place, is because there are, anyone at or below 200% of poverty level now can get the services for free, and these companies are going to utilities and saying, you can pay us to go do these measures, and they just roll through and they'll do, a few measures, and then and in some cases they charge a fee to those customers, and so we're constantly paying attention to those proposals from companies, what the utilities are trying to do in terms of releasing their RFPs and their services, to ensure that to the extent possible we can get these services to eligible households for free.
Well, actually what is troubling about this is the utility company that we're dealing with is opposed to the idea, but our consumer advocate is put it in their rate case testimony.
For on-bill financing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, on-bill financing is fine. You just don't provide it to people who are eligible for free service, and
Exactly.
I think that's a struggle that I have sometimes, is that there are programs that are appropriate and work, and we just have to make sure that whoever is delivering them knows that for this population, and you have to screen to make sure that you're not providing a service at cost or for a cost to people who are eligible for free. But it's tough when we have a long wait list of people who, and so we have, like they say, well, something's better than nothing, and so that is a very delicate situation, because I can't be against energy efficiency or providing dollars to reduce energy consumption, but I need to stay strong on the fact that these people should not be paying for it. And then it's just a matter of, like, well, when are they going to get served then? And that's an ongoing conversation that has been for a very long time.
So, Oregon free business.
Yeah, that's why it is so important to have an energy specific person for low income. Our relationship at times is contentious with the ratepayer advocacy group, because they don't understand low income issues. They don't. They try, they say they do, but they don't.
And sometimes they don't care.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of where I'm at right now with them, because I'm just terribly disappointed, and I haven't been able to convince them of our argument. And I say, I think we're putting our agencies in jeopardy and they're wanting to partner with us. That's the other thing. If a family finds out, oh, I can do online on-bill financing, so they pay for it, and then 2 months later, they're eligible for weatherization, they're gonna come back on us.
Yeah.
And say, why am I paying for something that
You
you could have done for free?
Well, and one way to engage in the process without hiring a lawyer, I mean, generally there is an open comment or public testimony portion to proceedings, and as an agency, you can in the past have written letters, had a lot of organizations sign on to it, present that to the commission, go to the testimony, the public comment sessions, say your piece, and then that goes on the public record, and that means that the consumer advocacy organization has to contend with the public saying that they're not being represented adequately, and those issues are on the record then.
And